Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Shieh. I'm the artist in residence at Wavepool, and here today we're presenting the Cincinnati's Table event.
Hi there, my name is V. Chow. I'm the model and cosplayer from Mest Comics, self-written and published right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thank you so much for joining us today in conversation and for lunch.
Yeah, so we recently just met and we thought we might do a couple of icebreakers before we jump into our deeper conversation about this event. So would you like to start with your question?
Yes, yeah. So, Daniel, I had some time to think about what questions I want to ask you. And one that really stood out to me is, because you're an artist, if you could paint a picture of any scenery that you've ever seen before, what would you paint?
So I'm always drawn to like really otherworldly looking places. There's this place in China with the mountains that has many stripes of colors. It just looked like it couldn't have been natural. So that's one place I would really love to paint just because it's such a fantastical looking place. I want to paint that and have that image like near me in my home as a painting. Yeah, that's something I would really like to do.
That sounds absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. So I also have a question for you. So since we're doing a meal today, what was the most amazing meal that you ever had?
The most amazing meal that I've had in a while. So a couple of months back, my friends and I decided to make this traditional Chinese dish called Hainanese chicken, Hainanese chicken and rice, and it was so simple yet completely out of this world. So it's basically you stuff an entire chicken with radishes, onions, and garlic, and then you put it in a pot of boiling water for about 45 minutes. You reserve the stock from the chicken, and then you make your rice with it. And so I would say the superstar of the meal is actually the rice that's been cooked in the bone broth, and then it's whatever sauces you want with it. That's the secret to it. It's delicious.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Wow. Cool. So as part of this Cincinnati's Table event, we also have my exhibition of my project that I've done for the past few weeks. It's called Familiarly Foreign, which I interview non-Asian people and will ask what kind of Asian objects they have in their house and it's the story behind them. So I'll show you just a few I have here. So part of this project was to find objects that mean something to the person, to show that Asian culture in its many different ways is a part of American life. It's not something that's really foreign or separate that most people might think. So here we have from one of my friends here. It's a pair of Tai Chi shoes. Actually, he didn't think about this pair of shoes when I first asked about the Asian objects, but then later we realized that he actually practices Tai Chi really often, so it's a kind of a routine for him. And
it's a ritual.
Yeah, and when I was interviewing him, we talked about how like he went to like parks to like practice with other people, which is something that growing up I would see a lot of people doing that in parks. So that kind of was a weird like bridging of like different lives. So yeah, and here's a couple other ones. This one I really want to talk about with you. It's a lotus lamp. So growing up, I always see this in like houses with like a shrine in the corner of the house. It's usually a dark corner, and this light is typically like red. So it's like a really kind of ominous, but also like a really respected spot in the room that's red. So I went into a friend here. She had this in her house. So at first, she was showing me a lot of other objects, and she didn't really even think about this thing, because she had this for about 2 years now, and it's kind of in the back of her mind. So yeah, she this light is in her kitchen and it's lit all the time, even if she's like traveling. So she first bought it to kind of remember her past mother by. So she described to me when she at night when she would come downstairs and the kitchen would be lit up, and she would feel like it's as if her mother's lighting up the kitchen and making things safe. So it was these objects that they didn't really think about first when I asked them what kind of Asian objects they have. But then I realized that it's such a big part of their life that they don't really think of it as foreign anymore. So here I'm just gathering all these objects together to show that there's a lot of like intersections between like Asian culture and like American culture. Yeah.
Quick question. Did
Sure.
she mention where she bought that by chance?
So it's a grocery store nearby Cincinnati. It's somewhere close by. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Uh-huh.
nice.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah. So originally it was the Red Light, but she hasn't been back to the grocery store, and she's had to change the bulbs, so she just used like a normal like yellow bulb. So yeah. Mm-hmm. So for each interview I did for each object, I transcribed it into a book. It goes through like where and when they got the object, and how long they've had it, and what they think of when they see the object. So how is that part of their life? So yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. These are quite the artifacts that exist in people's homes that have so many meanings, so many different groups and cultures.
Yeah, part of the reason I want to display it like this is when you first walk in, it might seem like you're looking at like some Asian person's possessions that it's all out on display, but really it came from many, many different non-Asian people. So I wanted that kind of like shock moment,
Yeah.
to help us think about it. It is actually a part of our lives,
Yeah.
America.
I think there's a lot to be said about the affinity that a lot of different groups have for one another.
Yeah, definitely.
It's hot.
finally felt like an American was when I went back to Asia.
Uh-huh.
When I went back to Vietnam this past December, and just to experience myself back in the culture that I spent my childhood in, that was when I really experienced the way in which I had become an American.
Uh-huh.
One example, anecdotally, would be traffic laws.
Mhm.
Traffic law seems to be very different in Vietnam than it is in a lot of American cities. I don't know what the Vietnamese traffic run on, but it seems like it runs on the Holy Spirit.
Uh-huh. Gotcha. So you said you had all these things in your bedroom. Growing up, did you know that you'll eventually immigrate to America, or you just have these objects because of it's like a pop culture thing that a lot of people have?
So it was definitely part pop culture thing for sure. And then the other, because my family and I, we are refugees from Vietnam, but we had always hoped that it would be America that would sponsor us. It did come into fruition. So in some ways, those images were symbolisms and reminders that we wanted this dream to come true.
I see.
Like we dreamt of America before we ever saw her. That's a fascinating question. That was really deep. So I have a question for you as well. So I joke that it wasn't until a few years ago that I came out as Asian American. Before then, I would have just identified, introduced myself as a Vietnamese person or a refugee. It wasn't until other people looked at me and they were essentially saying, but you're Asian, or you're from Asia, right? That I decided to look at a map and figure out where Asia was. And I was like, I guess I'm from there. So it started with identifying with the continent, full of different cultures, before I ever really looked into what it meant as a cultural identity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did you have a question? Or?
Yeah, so another question I had for you was, growing up, what was an understanding of what being American means? What did it mean for your parents? And before, when they first immigrated here, and what does it mean now?
So I think one of the things that is, I guess, stereotypically often say is Americans like things that are larger than life. Like you like your meal portions really large. You like your, like you dream really big. You're all about individualism. And growing up in Vietnam as a child, I'd always dreamt of what that might mean to be this individual, to have this, what is this American dream? So I've been chasing that elusive dragon for a while. Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting because growing up, I traveled between America and Taiwan many times, and sometimes when I'm being more unruly, my parents would say "Oh, be careful, you're becoming too American." And it was always really interesting how they perceive some American children as like that, really independent and less respectful to parents. Or maybe that came from the TV shows they watched. But yeah, there was this perception of what America is, and coming here many years, I realized that a lot of American children, they have similar upbringings, really, really strict house rules, and yeah, so it was interesting that there was this perception of America as being really different. Yeah.
Yeah, there is that cultural Golf. All right. With that being said, I think so for my next question, so I've always really liked the idea of being a third cultural kid. So what that means is, like you might have a culture at home with your parents, and then you have a different culture in the society in which you live, and then another different culture in the school that you navigate through. So you are essentially navigating through 3 different spaces. And I'm super curious as to know how have you navigated your Taiwanese roots, your American influence, and just like the overall multicultural space that you exist in?
So when I first went to America for a year and learned English, that was around the time when I was 9. So I was really immersed because I was really young, so I didn't really have a conception of like I'm really different from them. So I was just making friends. But then after that year, going back to Taiwan, people really saw me differently as someone whose Chinese isn't as good as them, but who knows English. So that I started to feel kind of like an in-between person. Like I'm not really completely Taiwanese anymore, but not really American either because I don't have a citizenship. So the next time I came to America was during college, and that was when I started really thinking about like what does being like Taiwanese mean. Like I spent a lot of time when I was back home thinking about America and consuming like American culture, like pop culture, like songs and movies and stuff. So I put a lot of effort into understanding Americanness and then not giving as much attention to like my Taiwanese part of me. So while in college, I started to realize that I really shouldn't be like pushing the Taiwanese part away. It can be like Taiwanese and American can be like existing together.
I really like that.
Yeah.
That sounds like quite the journey.
Yeah, definitely
With
has.
yourself.
Yeah, I think that's probably common to a lot of people, Asian people who live here. It's like they felt like they had this connection to another land, but sometimes it feels as if it's forced on them that they have to identify with another culture, which they're not really familiar with. So there's definitely this kind of struggle all the time growing up, like which culture is really my culture when both of them can be your culture, yeah.
So that really reminds me of something one of my favorite comedians said about assimilation versus integration. Assimilation is where you would sacrifice like your former selves, your former allegiances for the new. Versus, whereas integration is you take the old, the new, and you put it together and you form something new. Which I have come to think as a radical new idea, but not really new. But it has been quite a process for me as well. That's really cool to know that we're not alone in the journey. Yeah.
That reminds me of a thing that I recently learned that was super interesting to me. It's that when we think about assimilation of like, say I'm trying to assimilate to American culture, and me by doing that, like American culture changes because I'm assimilating to it. So it's not like American culture is something static that we try to become towards. It changes as we become part of it. So American culture is really this whole thing that keeps changing with new immigrants and yeah.
I think culture in general is not static. I think it's very dynamic. It's continually shifting and changing. And I think one way that you can really see that is through recipes, food, right?
Yeah.
How ingredients change over time, where you source your ingredients, if you even have access to these ingredients, and yeah, that's smelling a lot of really good food right now.
Yeah, so with that said, we should start making our food for everyone to see.
Yeah, I love that. Let's do it.
So I will demonstrate a little how to make dumplings, how my mom taught me.
Here's some gloves.
So I chose to bring dumplings to this event because dumplings are such a ubiquitous food in America. I think most people have tried dumplings before, and you can find frozen ones in most supermarkets. But growing up, making dumplings has always been this communal event that I think maybe a lot of people wouldn't know from eating frozen dumplings. Can you turn this on?
Oh yeah. That's so good.
So I will just show a little bit how my mom taught me. I'm not really good at it, so just go easy. So you take a piece of dumpling wrapper in your hand and you wet the edges. And then you take a bit of filling. So this filling is just cabbage and pork and with sesame oil and soy sauce. And you take the filling and you press it really hard into it so it sticks to the wrapper. And then you close it at the top. And then you start from one end and you just pinch it close. Okay, this first one isn't that good, so I'll do another one. Thank you. And just close at the top. Start from the one edge to the other. Close it. Just pinch it hard enough so you don't see any gaps forming afterwards. Right, last one. And just like that, you can start cooking it. Alright, so I'll bring out some of the ones I made before.
That looks delicious.
So, add a little oil. Just a little bit to coat the pan. Swirl it around. And then you put them in just one by one and kind of position them a little neatly so it looks good when it finishes cooking.
ASMR. Good sizzle.
I usually like to position into like sort of a round shape, so when it comes out it fits nicely on the plate. And that's how my mom always does it. Okay, so we'll add a little water. Just pour enough water to go to about halfway covering the dumplings. And you turn the heat down to about medium heat. Then just cover and let it simmer until the water is mostly reduced, and then we'll wait from then. Yeah. That's it.
Oh, wonderful. Hey, so with your dumplings, I also decided to make this traditional caramelized fish recipe from my hometown back in central Vietnam. It's called gak ho, and it literally translates into fish braised in a clay pot. So it's traditionally made in a clay pot, but we decided to make things easier on ourselves and make it in a pan. Yes, and since ga is a catch-all for fish in general, we are actually, we caramelized a red snapper that we got at Finley Market. Yes.
Oh, that smells really good.
Yeah, so it's basically caramelized in fish sauce, sugar, scallions, some cilantro. Yeah, you need your scallion and ginger. Yeah, and it's very aromatic. I would say it has it's like a deeply pungent smell of like this really earthy and sweet smell of the fish sauce and caramelization. I think, yeah, it looks done. So let's transfer it. How's the dumpling stuff?
It's boiling. Just give it a couple of minutes and then be done soon.
Oh, wonderful. Let's see if I can remove this entire fish onto this plate without breaking it apart. Can you see the way this flakes? Wow, it's amazing. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'll hold it.
Yes.
So.
Oh. It's gonna be delicious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's falling apart, it's gonna be good.
If it's falling apart, that's mean it's cooked. For sure. You know what? No.
What about if I tap the pot a little and then you scoop it out?
Yeah, let's do that.
Can you reach?
Great idea. Oh.
Do you want the sauce with it?
She's not as beautiful as when she started off, but it'll be delicious.
It tastes beautiful.
Yeah, it'll taste amazing. Wow. Yeah, no, it's perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. You can still see all of her colors. Like, it's kind of pink hue. But the sauce is going to be amazing. Yeah.
Can't wait to try it.
Oh, so I made us some rice as well. And my favorite way to make rice is to cook it in like a stock that I've made maybe 3 nights before from vegetable ends. So it's made in a chicken and vegetable broth. See?
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So you're not wasting anything.
No, you don't waste anything at all. Oh, thank you.
we're doing it family style. We just have the main dishes on one plate, and we'll each have one bowl where we just grab a little food and then eat it with rice. That's how it's usually done in the family. We don't have individual plates with all the dishes on them. We just have one main dish and a bowl of rice. Yeah.
I think one particular reason why I enjoy eating family style is that it helps me with portion control. I feel like when I'm eating from a large bowl, I tend to gorge, and for some reason feel like the food is about to run away from me, so I eat faster.
Yeah.
But when it's like in a smaller bowl, I tend to take my time to the point where it becomes strangely meditative, and I feel like I take forever in a small bowl of rice. But
so when the water is almost mostly gone, you can just add a little bit more oil in there, just to make sure that it'll be really crispy. Here you can see the brown start to form. That forms a crust on the bottom. And you just want to cook it until the brown is like really even on the bottom. And that's what makes it really crispy and nice. If you're cooking it for the first time, you can just flip it up at some points to check if it's browning. Yeah, because sometimes you can't, it's hard to tell. You can see this is what's happening. That's the color you want. Alright, so I think we're done with the dumplings. I'm gonna go ahead and plate it. Okay. So some of them are sticking, but it's okay.
Can I help you with anything?
No, I think this is it. Some of them don't look as good as the other ones. It's okay. Let's practice.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about this recipe that you chose.
Sure. So this recipe is it's a pretty simple filling. It's just cabbage and pork. It's one of the more popular combinations in Taiwan. So you get shredded just diced cabbage and then add a little carrot to give it a little color. It's not really for the taste. And then add some ginger and cilantro, aromatics. And yeah, you just mix it all together and put it in the wrapper. And yeah, this is one of my favorite recipes. My mom always makes, so yeah.
Incredible. It smells delicious. I wish you all could be here. Yeah, let's sit down.
All right.
Yeah, let's sit down to this delightful meal.
So we should each grab a bowl, right?
Would you mind putting the rice in?
Rice, sure.
Yeah, you start.
So this is bringing back a lot of memories because I'm always the person doing this in the house. I like before a meal, I don't really help around that much except fill the bowl with rice. So
Okay.
it's always like I feel it like, and then I ask my parents like how much they want like every time I feel it. So
Oh,
yeah.
That's quite a sweet memory.
yeah.
I think that there's a lot of like sentiment locked in food and the ingredients we choose and the different motions, like muscle memory almost when we're putting
Definitely.
the food together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where would you like to sit? There. Or
I'll sit right here.
Cool. Awesome. I'll take that.
Go.
I always eat with these porcelain chopsticks for everything, no matter the meals, the regional cuisines I'm eating. It's always with a pair of chopsticks.
So I'm gonna put this.
So
to
tell
the
me about the
side.
first time you ever made this recipe, these dumplings. What was challenging about it? What was easy? What was it like when you made it for the first time?
Usually my mom would be doing the filling and I would come in like at the last moment to wrap the dumplings. So she mostly taught me how to wrap it, and it takes some skill to be able to make it look good. You can like close it however much you want, but it took me a couple of tries to get it to look right, and it was always be like us comparing like our work while we're doing it, like which one's better, and yeah, being able to tell who made which one after it's cooked from the way it's wrapped. So yeah.
It's like a signature.
Exactly, yeah.
In food. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I am dying to try this. Wow. That is the perfect crunch. Would you be okay with it if I dipped this
Yeah.
with a
Go
fish
for
and
it.
see how it goes? So this is the other part of my question that I wanted to ask you. Have you ever remixed this recipe? Have you ever added any other ingredients from a different region of the world or a spice in your cabinet that you forgot was there for?
So my mom had many different variations of filling that she would do, just based on how she feels and what's in the fridge, kind of. So there's never really a set recipe. So for this one, it's one thing that she always makes. So I've only like done it a few times because I wanted to have that familiar taste. So I haven't like changed too much. Yeah, I've mostly done it just to have like try to be the same.
Yeah.
As it was originally. Yeah.
There's something about tradition that makes many cultural groups want to carry it on from the previous generation. Yeah.
So
that was amazing.
yeah, I had a question for you. So when I came here about 10 years ago, I had a friend who asked me like what kind of American food I like, and I couldn't really think of any. So he gave me the example of like hot dogs, hamburgers. But then, as I was living here for about like a couple of years, I started to realize that I learned about like Cajun food and like soul food, Mexican food, Chinese food, Japanese food, and I realized that they're all American food. Like, so when someone asks you like what's American food, what comes to mind the quickest and why?
What comes to mind the quickest when I think of American food? Well, I will say that the first American food exposure I've ever had to was McDonald's overseas. The Golden Arches has captivated my imagination in a way that honestly sounds ridiculous aloud. But I love McDonald's, and I still consider McDonald's to be like the pinnacle of American food. And I mean that in this idea of food that is so readily prepared. It kind of reminds me of street food, and I think that that's how I kind of made that correlation, is that it was like the closest thing to street food because it was so fast and so readily available. Even though ironically I've never actually had McDonald's overseas. And I only ever have McDonald's when I am catching an early bird, like an early flight, red-eye flight. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you made the comparison between like street food and fast food, because I always had the perception that there's not really street food in America except like state fairs, but it's not really on the streets. But yeah, that makes sense.
I have a soft spot for state fairs and food festivals, just because it's the when I'm kind of reminded of that street food culture, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, this is delicious. So there is this show on Netflix called Ugly Delicious, where they showcase some of the global cuisine that would make the average American palate squeamish, I would say. Are there any foods that you enjoy that would fall into that category of ugly delicious?
Well, I really like beef tripe, the part that's like the cow's stomach. But that's really interesting when you say like average American palate, because I recently learned that in the South they fry fish whole. In Florida they eat alligators, and there's a lot of like food that people might think is like not for like the more less adventurous eaters. So yeah, I'm wondering like why it's what kind of people like is the average American palate when there's actually so many of these really exotic looking food, like even like crayfish boil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good point. Valid point. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess my last question is, since like Asian people have been in America for more than a century, but they're still so easily seen as foreign. This like perpetual foreigner syndrome. What do you think are some things that we can do to like push back on this like general perception of, like Asian people as being foreign?
I've really wrestled with that for as long as I've lived in America, maybe the past 20 years. And where I am currently is this idea of showing up as your full self whenever, as much as possible, wherever you are. So in some ways, I'm kind of just like proudly and defiantly Asian wherever I go. Yeah,
Mhm.
that would be it for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, thank you all for joining us on Cincinnati's table today. Hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. It's some topics that I've been really thinking about for a long time, so thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. And we would love to turn it over to the virtual community, all of you, with any questions and comments you may have. We'd love to hang out with you for a little bit longer and just talk. Yeah, so send in your questions and we'll try to answer it in real time.
I'm gonna try the fish.
Please.
I'm waiting.
Hey, try this fish.
So good.
Don't be shy. We're just stuffing our faces on camera. Don't be shy. Thank you again for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, please drop it in the comments below, and we'll be looking to answer them as soon as possible. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.